Recording. Hi. So again, it's Kari Johnston, and I am joining you today from Haines Junction on the traditional territory of the Champion and Ajax First Nations. And my guest today is Blair Hogan, and Blair's joining us from Whitehorse, Kwantlen Dun on Cochin Council traditional territory. And Blair, could you just tell us a little bit about your business?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Blair Hogan. I'm the president of Gunta Business Consulting. We're based out of Whitehorse. I'm from Teslin, so I was born and raised in Teslin, Yukon, which is about 180 kilometers south of Whitehorse. And I've been operating my business for the last 8.5 years in the Yukon. And also, I participate in the local governance of my community, Teslin Clean Council. So I've been part of the governance, the leadership of that, and part of the investments, the investment world that encompasses First Nation development corps and trusts and those types of investments. So it's been interesting for sure, and certainly more interesting today.
What's significant about today?
Well, as we were talking, and as everybody has been seeing, we're surrounded with this unique circumstance of just not being able to do business the way we typically do business. And from a community level, it's been pretty difficult. Like, part of my business as well is community development, community facilitation, events. Jesse Stephen with Gunta Business, we've been doing a lot of community planning, and a lot of that work requires audiences, requires a lot of people in the same room. That has certainly stopped and will not occur under the current model. Zoom seems to be kind of like this godsend. Thankfully, there's not just Zoom. I've even noticed that when this all started, the Northwest teleconferencing service, it just gets slammed. It seems like it's the natural government go-to. It's secure. It's a local system, and half the time you can't get on your line, your reserved line that you have. And so I've recognized that even from a community government perspective, who I find governments are notoriously slow at responding to these types of things. Typically, not Yukon government, not federal government today. With COVID, they've actually been very good and responding very quickly. But in the way you do business, it's certainly been a little bit more difficult. And a lot of the infrastructures, is kind of set. Like, we can't now scale up our bandwidth in our communities just because everybody, even kids, they're all in their homes. They have to receive their lesson plans. Like, we have our kids from college. They are my stepkids. They're home right now. One of them transitioned well, one of them not so well. When you're a baker and you have to have a commercial baking experience, you can't even replicate that at home. And it's hard to transition that to an online platform. So I'm seeing in the community, it's going to be very difficult. Like, kids are going back to school, but they have to continue their lesson plans. Are the parents equipped for this? Are the community's infrastructure equipped for this? It's going to be interesting, and we're going to have to leverage all technologies. Like, it's, if everybody goes online, we're going to swamp those avenues. So it has to, there's going to have to be some pretty unique applications here of layering different technologies together. It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
It is. It certainly is interesting times. So, yeah, a lot of your business model is sort of around bringing people together to have big, complex conversations about how we build, whether it's community or how we build sort of energy structures. So what have you learned about that in your business, right? Like these days, where's your mind cast in how you might solve some of those problems in this place?
So my business, so I do a lot of business planning, a lot of feasibility studies, economic development, research applications. So, business studies, business cases, feasibility studies, a lot of times is required before you can kind of move forward with anything. And my business has been really focused on renewable energy, local energy. And working on that very focused, I see that being a really critical step moving forward for everybody. Even us on our microcosm, our families, our homes, do we have gardens? Do we have the ability to store colds, without electricity? Are we equipped, with preservation, with jars and drying and, smoking? These are all the traditional things that people used to do, and it was very common to eat salted food, and very common to eat food or smoked food, or food stored in cold cellars underneath your ground. My grandpa was telling me in Watson Lake that there was a community cold storage, and it was dug deep and right near a permafrost patch, and people would put as a community, they would put their cold stores together. And then he was telling me about the local ice maker, right? 40 years ago, there was somebody who had the capacity and the industrial capacity to either store ice. They would harvest the ice in the winter and store it, and then they would bring it out in the summertime with when businesses and people needed ice. And you just think how we're taking so many things for granted personally, and then you kind of multiply that out to a community. And even cities, right? Our cities, where we have blessed infrastructure that's dependent on electricity, and it's dependent on the roads and the infrastructure to support it, and the supply chains that support them. How much do we actually do and receive and produce locally? We're going to find out, and we are finding out. And I see a lot of really great businesses responding to this, a lot of really great businesses that were already positioned, but I see more so people positioning and to support this local creation. From our perspective, my perspective with Gunta Business, local energy, and one of the biggest opportunities, and everything we talk about here is a problem, but when I see problems, I see opportunities. That's what they taught us in business school, that you really need to see problems for the opportunities that they can bring forward. And with us, it's where are we getting our space heating, our local heat, and a lot of it is coming from Alberta, it's coming from Texas, it's coming from wherever. And when those types of supply channels start to become challenged, if we're going to start having homes burst pipes, and thankfully we're warming up now. Hopefully this this could have been a lot worse. This could have been right in the middle of the coldest season. We could have had a washout on the road, for instance. Could you imagine a washout on the road like we've had a few years ago, and people are fighting in the grocery stores for turkeys? Imagine that compounded with COVID-19 pressures. I mean, people are almost fighting for toilet paper right now, or were at least when there was a lot more pressure in the grocery stores. But and I think also we have the blessing of at least seeing this happen elsewhere. And it's kind of this wave rolling forward. And I just remember being in the hospital with my grandpa, who's doing better now. He's at home. But when we were at the hospital, we were seeing that front line, that red line. At first it was cones and pylons with the tape, and this is where you need to sit to get tested, and and then they just shut the hospital right down from visitors. So you can kind of see that line moving in. It was mid-March, towards the end of March, that we really felt the impact here, which we can benefit now from seeing Italy, from seeing New York, from seeing all these other very impacted places. But what can we do now, right? I think that's the question, is what can we do? It seems like a lot of those government funding sources that were really available for energy projects are going to be diverted to business relief, to income relief, human resource relief, and that's good. But I am sensing that there will be more funding available that is going to focus on these COVID-19, that midterm, not just how do we pay the bills today, but how do we make sure that communities have local food in a month, in 7 months. We could be living in a whole new world. We don't even know what the post-COVID-19 summer is going to look like. These things this could become a new norm. It could become a new annual flu. That they were doing some modeling in Ontario and Saskatchewan, and they're looking at what that looks like for the rest of Canada, and that on a best case, mid case scenario, they think about half the population will be eventually affected, impacted by it, at the rate of infection across Canada that we can see. And that's pretty scary, when you think about what you do and your family and who that could impact more than others. And and then when you expand that and think, well, what's going to happen with their food sources? The grocery stores don't have an indefinite stock to draw from. We're going to all have to go back to business, but what is that going to look like? And I think having local foods takes the pressure off. Having the ability to have local energy takes the pressure off. Electricity is really difficult just because it takes so long to get that in place, but we all can become more decentralized, right? We don't have to put so much enormous pressure on the grid. I live in Whistle Bend, and all of our houses here were built with baseboard electricity. Electricity is the primary heat source. And, you think about when it starts getting really cold, and then in Haines Junction, a line or ice plug up one of our primary generators, what's to guarantee that I'm not going to have burst pipes and flooding and, all kinds of havoc. So I think this, in some ways this is good. I think it's forcing a lot of people, businesses, government to put more focus on these things that we like to talk about. We like to talk about local energy, local food security. And there is money that's being put there, but truly what has been the adoption? What has been Yukon government's actual adoption of heat agreements? What has been the government's push in Yukon Energy's, NACO's actual adoption, creation of independent power producer agreements? And how come we're not seeing all of these energy projects come forward that we've been hearing for years and years now? So I'm thinking that a lot of people, a lot of governments have had a lot of great ideas. We've all been talking about them. I think now is really a great opportunity to start moving a lot of these things forward and really creating a more robust local economy, creating a robust food sector. And yeah, everything that we could do together can make that happen. From Gunta Business perspective, we're really challenged. I'm stuck at home. I've been stuck at home for 3 weeks now, as most people have. Most Yukoners from when we've been truly impacted. I think we've been really swamped up until end of March. So we're just starting to see what we have to do now internally to kind of renew our own business model. How do we become more of a practical tool for Yukon, for businesses, for our current clients? A lot of our clients are government. We work with a lot of governments and First Nation development corps and large businesses. But, we're just trying to organize ourselves to become more useful. And maybe this is something to just kind of put out there. But you got to think about all these First Nation governments, these development corps, these large enterprises, both government, nonprofit, as well as public, and they have a job to do. They all have many jobs to do. But now business is impacted. And like I said, we're not all properly built for this transition. So the contractor community is really going to have to step up to fill in that void. And there's a lot of monies on the table with a lot of these entities that if they don't spend that money, it goes away. And a lot of that money is required. It's health, social, it's recreation, it's all these things that now have been impacted but are still important. So, it's going to be some real trial and error. But I think, this business community that I represent, that I'm part of, this independent contractor community, and you see Yukon government, you see Yukon College, my colleagues at Outfront, they're working on different ways to harness some of that capacity, and I think that's great. But I think, and Michael Pilo and I were talking about this, that we would be in a lot better position right now if we had a community business counseling service that we had previous, like, you know, years past. We had the e-commerce project where we had independent consultants like myself that have a business background. We were working with a number of communities, a free service supplied by, funded by the government, but it allowed local business supports in the communities to really kind of work through those pain points that they have. How do they have access to market? Are they utilizing all the business tools? Do they understand financing? You know, do they understand their own business operations? How do we move that forward? And now, where people can't leave the communities, what support are they going to get when we have issues with internet, and we're going to have connectivity issues? Certainly, when everybody in the school system flocks to the internet, we're going to really be struggling. So it is tough that we don't have that level of support in the communities right now for businesses. But and then internet being the great leveler is not going to be as useful when everybody is online. And already I'm sure the communities are struggling because everybody's home, they're watching their Netflix, they're online to a huge degree. Northwest Tel has opened up some data requirements for communities, more so in the main centers. But yeah, I think it's going to be challenging. But I think all of us as Yukoners, as businesses, we have to be just a little bit more adaptable. And you know, I don't know the answer, but it's just about doing your business a little bit differently, right? Everybody. And then I think opening ourselves up to be more available to those types of clients that we wouldn't have typically been. You know, if you're not typically working for a not-for-profit, you know, and you know, it's going to be a different time. Our rates are going to be changing. You know, people don't have the ability to pay a lot of the high rates required for some of the experts out there. It's, you know, a lot of that has been built around an economy that is not going to be the economy we're going to get used to. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be different for us as well.
I think, yeah, you've brought up a number of really good points. I kind of want to go back to a few of the things that you said. I recall when I was first here in the territory, I was part of some strategic opportunities at Yukon College, and one of the elders there sort of said, you know, here in the territory, we have this benefit of seeing what happens down south first and then watching it roll its way into the territory. And I think we are uniquely positioned right now to be able to see the extent of the pandemic in other jurisdictions and being mindful of how we're sort of changing what we do to be ready for that as and when and if it comes to the territory. So, and then you kind of segued into that and talking about the resourcefulness of Yukoners and talking about the old ice blocks and how there was a lot more self-sufficiency, especially in rural Yukon. And I think, you know, when you bring that in on conversations about energy and food production, and, you know, there's part of my mind that does go towards the draft climate change strategy that the territory had produced, and really that conversation that's in there about building adaptation plans for rural Yukon and Yukon as a whole, and those key concepts of how do we heat our buildings, how do we provide energy for ourselves, how do we feed ourselves. And I think, you know, in this time, there's that opportunity for us to build those shovel-ready projects to kind of do that intellectual work, that work that needs to be done. Somebody coming into your room behind you. And it's all part of the fun of filming these things at home, right?
Yeah. My 5-year-old's wondering where I've been for the last 30 minutes.
That's right. That's right. You know, and then also, you know, how we get creative as businesses who facilitate those sort of shovel-ready projects and build the community support around them. You know, how we engage in really different ways and how we sort of get the collective mind thinking around some of these issues. I kind of wanted to throw it just a little bit sideways, and I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about sort of where your wellness practices, how are you kind of staying grounded through all of this as a business owner who's got to be making big decisions and thinking about these big, complex, system-wide things. So what are some of the things that you're finding healing and strength in?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, it's just been so rewarding to be home with my son that I've been too busy to properly engage with all the time, and not all the time, but it's been challenging. Certainly in this first quarter of this year, which was very busy for us. We had a lot of commitments we had to fulfill before the end of April, which is a lot of our clients' end of their fiscal. And but just being home, my wife and I, we both work with the same business, so I think that's a bit of a unique challenge as well, that we kind of have to figure out how are we going to properly tend to our son and educate him and interact with him on a level that is really fulfilling for him and us, as well as how do you maintain the house, and we have teenagers at home, and I think a lot of people understand how helpful teenagers can be sometimes, and unhelpful at other times. So I mean, that brings its unique challenges, but I think it's just been really nice to see people are understanding the value of community. People are starting to see, hey, we're stronger together than individually. Like, it's just been so weird how society is shifted to so individualistic. It's not uncommon to go downtown, not in Whitehorse, but like in the bigger cities, and people just do not communicate with each other. There's no person-to-person interaction. It's not quite as obvious in Whitehorse. It's still, we're small enough, we still see people. And then communities, it's kind of strange, and you would know this as well. Going into community, it's pretty, you wave to everybody you see.
Yeah.
And then as you leave the community, it's hard to turn that off. And you're waving to people who think, wow, who's this weirdo who's waving at me? And
I can't tell you the number of times I've been in,
go
like,
back to the community.
yeah.
And then they're like, why aren't you waving at me?
Oh, I can't tell you the number of times I've been in Calgary and, like, I'm waving at people while I'm driving in Calgary.
You're just the nicest Canadian in Calgary, that's for sure.
Exactly.
So in that regard, this is a powerful moment for society, in that our relationships, our personal relationships that we haven't been spending enough time with. It's a real opportunity to do that. I'm starting to tackle home projects that have been sitting there waiting for me to tackle for, I don't even want to tell you how long. Some of them a very long time. And I think that part of it's good. But I mean, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. But we're going all very stir crazy. And Yukon has just said that they're restricting outdoor activities. And, that's been okay for the first few weeks, but now it's starting to get really nice out. And I think that's going to become a huge obstacle, with and then even my office space. It's a collaborative workspace. The Northlight Center, the hub, the innovation hub, and like how are those types of environments going to work going forward? It's certainly going to be impacted, but yeah, from that community perspective, though, I think there's some pretty powerful aspects of what's happening that is going to kind of reground people, whether they want to or not. I wasn't ready to be grounded the way I've been grounded. Grounded almost like in a teenage go to your room, you're grounded sense, but also in this is probably good for me. And yeah, and just really all we have right now is just going for walks.
I know, right?
Around the and then the dogs get more action than anybody, really, right? There's no social distancing with dogs. They're smelling and chewing and chasing anything they can get close to. But yeah, no, and I had a friend visit yesterday for the first time in a while, and we got to hang out within 2 meters. So that that was the highlight, so. But how do you stay grounded? I'm very interested.
Oh, actually, yesterday was one of those funny days where I felt like not grounded at all. And part of it was because I went through what I was describing as like this daisy chain of Zoom meetings. I went from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And when I wasn't in a Zoom meeting, I was like all hands on deck with my 14-month-old. joined me in a couple of Zoom meetings because I wasn't able to schedule them during her nap time. So, and so that I've been kind of framing it like I have these guardrails on my days, and that is I do a little bit of stretching or yoga or something like that just to kind of keep my my mind in a meditative state, and I go for a walk. Like I got to get outside. And yesterday was the first day that I had neither of those things, and I felt it. I just felt this like pent up energy in my body that was like, where is this going, and why haven't you released it? Because I was so focused on this screen, and I was mindful of like, you know, whether I'm at home or I was in the office before, I would do that. I would sit in front of my screen and eat lunch, you know, working away at my computer and doing all this stuff, and how damaging that probably has been to my mind and to my body over time. And just for whatever it was, it became really clear to me yesterday. So I guess I've just been trying to frame it in these guardrails. What are the things that I need to do? Drink water, you know, just like what are these like really core values of who I am. And yeah, and just like, you know, work on my relationship with my husband and my daughter, and like those sorts of things where like, because you're just here, you're just in this really small space and you got to. And I think we're really fortunate, you know, I feel very blessed to live here and have so much space and to have the great outdoors so close, so that these walks are a real gift. And I'm grateful for them, because I'm mindful that I have friends who live back in Toronto who don't have the ability to go for these nice long walks in this clean, fresh mountain air. And so I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
So I think, like, have you had any major sort of aha moments about the territory in this time? Like, I know you do like to think big. You're a big systems thinker, and you were working on a lot of really big energy specific projects. So is anything coalescing? Anything, because we're in a paradigm shift, right? Like we're all in this space where the world as we once knew it isn't anymore, and we're sort of like headed in a slightly different direction. So any thoughts around that for you?
The $36 billion question, I'm sure. You know what? No real ahas other than it's just, I mean, so even like my parents, you know, trying to communicate with them about, hey, you know, there's Google Hangouts and Skype, and, you know, everybody who's so used to the way they do things, it's hard to change. It's hard to adapt. And I think that's going to be, you know, and just I'm using my parents as an example of my own pressure that I have to deal with and trying to get them to these different ways of communicating. But that's kind of a case study of how are we going to change how everybody operates. And you know, and I don't have an but I do recognize the challenge that we have. And you know, like, it's just going to be so interesting seeing the world of the future. You know, like I just don't see us hugging people the way we used to hug and shake everybody's hand. And, you know, I don't mind holding the banister down the mall. You know, I think there's going to be a certain germaphobe, or at least a germ awareness that is going to be prevalent that hasn't been there before. That's going to change the way people interact. You know, like, at Gunta Business, we're really happy. We're very proud of the fact that we have some of the community engagement records of 200 plus people showing up to event. Will that ever happen again? Is that even something to brag about? You know? People, oh, we had 200 people show up to our event. You should be locked up. You know?
Wow.
Oh, it changes. I mean, it totally, isn't that such a radical example of, you know, from wow, congratulations. Like, I can't believe you did that in such a time of difficulty with engagement on these types of public issues, to, you know, I was talking to a friend who had a sliding party, and it was his family of 6, and then 3 more showed up, and 1 more, and then it's a crime. You know, like, it's, you know, he's chargeable. It's just crazy, you know, and how soon will that change? You know, like, it's, yeah, I mean, I don't want to start speculating on how crazy this could get, but you know, there's nobody out there saying that there's no reinfection circle, you know, that'll happen again and again. Like it might not ever go away. So we may be dealing with a new reality forever. And you know, it's one thing to say, how is my business going to change in the next 3 to 6 months for the next 3 to 6 months? But it's another thing to say, how is my business going to change now in the next 3 weeks for the next 25 plus years?
Mm-hmm.
I think the level of adaptability on everybody is going to be such a high requirement. And I mean, everybody's going to have to change. It's been so funny, like even because I'm a young person in some of these old systems, like, you know, I've like you on a council, right? And I'm one of the younger people on my council, and, you know, a lot of, you know, and just trying to even get those people in those systems to start doing things a little differently has been very, you know, they still want to use the Northwest Tel call-in line. I can't get on half the meetings now. And that's just accepted. It's just the new reality. But, you know, really, well, we could be using Zoom. We could be using Skype. Skype just rolled out a new Zoom competitor app. So it's everybody meet on Zoom, Google Hangouts, and I'm not sure about Facebook. I know Facebook has got the Meet technology, but to really bring people together, and then you know, then you layer on top of that, oh, we can go to all these trusted systems. Oh, they're not trusted. Zoom affects your privacy, right? And anyway, it's just another. It's like
it has been interesting. We've, you know, putting my counselor hat on, we did adopt Zoom right out the gate as like the best option for us, because we wanted to be able to have our council meetings in public and make them as accessible as possible. And so the ability for people to call in using their phone or to use their computer or whatever piece of technology they have to time in and be there. I mean, the benefit for us is that our meetings are public, so great, like we get them out there. And so some of the questions about whether it's encrypted well enough or not, it's fine, because the whole intent of our meetings at a municipal space is for them to be as public as possible. And, you know, and I for me, I just continue to think about those things. Or what are the guardrails? What are the principles? What are the values that we want to bring to all the decisions that we're making right now? And how do we ensure that those things are there? Public access to what we do, and it's so important right now. So we were quick to adopt it, and there's certainly lots of challenges that come with it, but but it is what it is. And it's sort of like, we can't look backwards. And I always joke, because with my council, one of the things I said was one of my goals as a politician was to live stream our council meetings. And so, like, here we are in the age of COVID.
Good for you.
We've got to do that. And I think that's, you know, maybe that is part of it for innovators, for business owners, for people out there in the spaces. Like, what is on your bucket list? What has seemed like the impossible goal, the impossible thing to do? And then let's figure out how to move those things forward, because you know, this is our first pandemic. We've never done this before. We're in a space where we feel like we're like jumping off this cliff of the unknown that we as entrepreneurs often face. Like, when we're being entrepreneurs, we're moving into a space that is unknown, and that's what makes us entrepreneurs, is our ability to see the opportunity to jump off the cliff and to do what seems impossible to many. And that's what always inspires me about the work that you do, is taking the thing that's been so hard in the territory, to look at things like biomass, to look at energy production, to look at those things and say, well, here is the impossible, but here is a pathway forward.
So, I mean, absolutely right. And we are inundated with positive examples to look upon, and it's just you know, people like us to bring these things forward, right? Like a new way of communicating that's very transparent to your council. You know,
but it's not just us. This has always been the Yukon, right? Like, and we began this conversation by talking about the resourcefulness of the Yukon. And I think that's like one of the things that I've been thinking a lot lately about Yukon, is like, resourcefulness is the precursor to innovation. And we're so good at being resourceful up here, right? Like, we already know how to do so many of these things.
Yeah, and nothing like a monumental issue to really engage our resourcefulness is to be innovative, right? You know, I think and you were asking me kind of what am I reading right now, and I did pull out a book that I've been meaning to get involved with, but it's called Startup Nation, and it's a case study on Israel. Why is Israel so successful on the business side? Like, why is there so many startups? Why are they breaking all of the basic understandings of how business success stories roll out? You know, that 3 to 5 years, and that, you know, that lowering success rate of moving a business to fruition. They have huge success, and a lot of it is because they all have a uniform experience, like a lot of citizens that have been born and raised in Israel, and that was that they had to do military service. They had required military service, and a lot of, you know, and there's a lot of different things too. There's this reignition into their culture, into their language. Like, the Hebrew language was dead, you know, not that, you know, 60, 80, 100 years ago, and it's totally been reborn into a main language in many places. But I just find, and the reason why I bring this forward is that we're kind of not military service, but we're all going through a uniform situation right now. We're going through this massive realignment of reality, this pandemic, and I predict that we're going to have more businesses come alive and prosper, and businesses take necessary steps to address some of the fundamental issues that they've been experiencing, that they've been ignoring, because in profitable times it's just easier to ignore a lot of these issues. So we're going to see a lot of businesses go out of business, and maybe a lot of those, it's important that they did go out of business, but those that really hold on are going to adapt and change. We're going to see some very interesting startups come about that have been talked about for a long time, that maybe the circumstances weren't quite there. But I think across the board, we're going to see a larger than usual uptick in business startups and successful operation. And I'm just reading this book right now because even though it's not a pandemic, it's a once in 100-year pandemic. So there's no real-time modern examples to deal with, but you can start looking at things at how they impact, you know, and how can a universal impact change the thinking of a whole, not in our case nation, but a world. And that is a book that I'm reading right now.
That's a great recommendation. I haven't read it, so I'll pick it up. Thanks for this. This has been a broad-reaching conversation, as they always are with you, which is why I love whenever we get together at those public gatherings and we get a chance to sort of meet minds. So thank you for your time today.
And thank you so much for inviting me to this. This is great what you're doing. I'm looking forward to all of your interviews. You are really good at this. You're somebody that I certainly feel very able to open up with, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think you have a very strong skill for this. So I encourage you to keep up this great work, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a pleasure to do it, and I think there are so many great thought leaders and so many great innovators and so many resourceful people here in the territory. So it's my pleasure. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much.